Well, in the first session, our richest man in Babylon told you about the importance of budgeting. Now, in this one, we're going to talk about his second law for curing a marginal purse is to control your expenditures. Got to watch what you spend. Doesn't matter how much you make or how little you make. You can do well if you understand the control the expenditures. What matters is what you keep, not what you make. I've kind of gotten away from in goal setting exercises. It used to be very common to try to project out what kind of income you want for a goal. Although we still do a little of that, I have gotten to where we talk not so much about the income, but about the surplus, how much you have left after you have uh, made your money, spent your money, what do you keep? And I found that to be an extremely effective methodology. One of the mysteries of the universe is that your quote necessary expenses will tend to grow to meet or exceed your income. I still remember when I started out after graduating from college, I was thinking, wow, if I could just make blank amount, if I could make $25,000, I'd be rich after having been a poor college student. Well, then you discover as soon as you're making 25,000, you hit your goal, you're still broke. Well, gee, if I made 50, well, as soon as you hit 50, guess what? You spend more. And you 50,000, which is like winning the lottery when you're in college, and you still can't hardly make ends meet. Well, if only I made a six-figure income, then you go make 100,000, you're still broke. That never ends. That keeps going unless you change it. Even I've hit once $1 million for the year, and I wasn't negative, but I was certainly not as rich as you thought you would be when you're making $1 million a year. Does that make sense? It's a little hard to believe, but again, you'll see it when it happens. Let me give you an example. In California, I had a real estate company. I had several agents. I had, I don't know, 15, 20 different agents working for my company. I had one here, approximately 30 years old, Bill. We'll call him Bill. He made $500,000 a year for 2 years in a row, actually. He was right at basically $500,000 in commissions that I paid him. Unfortunately, his expenses. Now, if I asked you up front between just, if we look at just Bill and Mary, I had one agent making only about 50 grand, one making $500,000. If I were to ask you who is more successful, most people go right to Bill. Well, let's look at it a little further. That's what they made. Bill's expenses were 550,000. Mary's were 45. Bill ran a deficit of 50 grand a year. How did he do that? Called credit cards. Mary saved her money, saved 5,000 a year. We haven't done the math yet here, but 30 years later, if you could have earned 12%, or if you're spending 12% on the credit card, Bill would be in the hole $12 million. Mary would have 1.2 million. Quite a difference there. Now, who is more successful, Bill or Mary? Pretty easy. It's Mary. Now, it turned out Bill wouldn't have had 30 years. Bill would not be 12 million in debt. That's because Bill went bankrupt. In 2 years, shortly after this period, Bill filed bankruptcy, which ended the whole thing. That's what we're talking about here. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. Budgeting is 90% of the battle. Because remember, 10% is what you're shooting for to keep. Well, the rest of it is all budgeting. So people always want to spend more than they have. It is human nature. So we have to rein that human nature in a little bit. So we're going to do that by going through formalizing that process we started in the last module. We want to have a written budget, and you're going to evaluate your expenses, what are needs versus what are wants. A lot of people view them as the same thing, but they're very different. We want you to start evaluating your expenditures to see how much enjoyment you're really getting from it. Now, as I indicated earlier, we don't want you to cut out your favorite things in life here. We don't want you to cut out the thing you live for, but we want you to evaluate each item. Do you really get as much? If you're spending $300 a month, are you getting $300 of enjoyment per month from that? If you are, continue. If you're not, let's cut it back some. Or maybe we cut it completely out, depending what the item is. So we're going to evaluate all the expenses for what do you need, what do you want, and on the things you want, how much do you want them? Now, we want you to make a conscious decision, not just let it evolve like most people's budget really do. Because what doesn't work is cutting everything. You can't just cut across the board 10% of all discretionary spending, because again, it's not sustainable. You end up cutting out things you love, and as I mentioned, that's not probably going to work well. You can't cut out your favorite things in the world. It just long term will not work. It makes it too painful, and it's not sustainable. Same is true in dieting. Okay, if I cut down, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to cut down to 500 calories per day. Well, yeah, you can do that. And it is painful. And you can do it for a little while. But you're not going to live that way. It's not sustainable long run. And we need your budget to work like the diet. We need it to be sustainable. It's got to be a lifestyle, not a diet. Here's what does work. You pull out your 10% that we told you should save. We pull that out first and never touch it. Then we're going to pay your necessary expenses next. These are your fixed expenses, the things you think of as you can't get around them. You have to pay the mortgage. You have to make your car payment. Now, in the short run, it is true that those expenses are fixed. In the long run, even those expenses can be changed. You can buy a smaller house with a smaller mortgage. You can buy a different car and not have a $800 a month car payment. You can have a $400 a month car payment. Or you can buy used instead of new next time you do it. Some of the big ticket items that you think are required, maybe there are alternatives. So you have to be honest with yourself about what is truly necessary. And then also think in terms of there's a short run, long run aspect to this. So what's left is sort of evaluate your happiness factor. As you're going through the budget, what do you cut and what you don't? And don't try to do it across the board. That's not the solution. The wrong attitude is that you're a slave to the budget. That's why people hate budgeting. Well, I'm going to live with somebody looking over my shoulder, even if it's me. Wrong attitude. You're the one who makes the budget. You're the one looking over your shoulder. And if it doesn't make you happy, you don't do it. Or if the risk reward or trade-off between the reward from cutting now and enjoying the benefit later isn't there, you don't do it. I'm good with that. You need the budget. It's a tool. It works for you, not against you. It's just designed to get you to think before you spend the money. Here are some other principles that'll help you in the process. A big thing that blows a lot of people's budget is impulse purchases. They go to the store and they didn't have a list, which, by the way, is a tip. You should always work from a list, but you go in and, oh, yeah, that looks good. I should buy that. It looks good at the time. Or late at night, you're sitting watching TV and infomercial comes on and it's midnight and you've had a couple of drinks and you're surfing through the internet and you see something or the infomercial on TV, you watch it, and yeah, you buy the, I have to have the greatest hits of 1972. Yeah, sure, I will buy that. Look at it, it's a good deal. And then in the morning, you realize, oh, I just spent $140 for something that I'm not even sure why I bought it. So here's the tip. Anytime you're going to have an impulse purchase, a lot of people will set a dollar amount, like anything over $100, before they just buy it. They tell themselves, I'm going to think about it for 72 hours. So some people, depending on where your budget is, this might only kick in at $500. You don't really care under that. Others might be at $50. So it'll depend on where you are in your budget, kind of. But what it does is, you know what? I think I want that. But then you sort of wait as your 72 hours, and 72 hours comes up, and ask yourself, do I still want it? And what you will frequently find, no, I don't really need the greatest hits of 1972. I could do without it. So that'll save you a ton of money over the course of a year, which will not blow your budget. So you want to avoid obvious leaks in your budget, waste. If your thermostat is set at 80 degrees in winter, well, do you really need it that warm? How about wear a sweater? Turn it down to 68, maybe even less. If you need air conditioning, do you really need it to be 65 degrees in the room, or would 75 help? Little changes like that to your heating bill, your electricity, make sure you turn the lights, all the stuff your mom and dad told you. Turn the lights out when you leave a room. All that stuff, there's a reason for that. It really adds up. So you can lower your utility bill. You can lower your electric bill. So avoid duplication. You discover, both you and your spouse. Recently, I talking to my wife, and we both have Amazon Prime, and we both spent money on it separately. Well, we could have, it's all shipped to the same place. Why do we have to pay twice for it? So avoid some duplication. Smart, do you need to pay for it, or can you get a free version? There's a lot of things could be free rather than paying for it online. If we're going to have a project done, maybe we want some landscaping done, bid's going to be $9,500 from one vendor. Well, you know what? We should probably have a second bid. Maybe that's high, maybe it's not, but we should find out. I've had things where there was like a $5,000 difference on the bid, so it's not insignificant. Shopping around, buying stuff in the off season. You want to buy the winter clothes in summer clothes in winter, all that sort of thing. Very common that people just kind of avoid all those things. Can save you a lot of money on your budget. Action steps. What should you be doing? You should develop, go through this process, what we've talked about, develop an expense strategy. Which of these rules you're going to adopt. Actually, write all this down. How are we going to handle things? Which expenses we think we can cut, which we can't. Experiment some. Again, you won't get it right the first month. You'll discover you missed certain things. That's okay. We can make changes. Remember, it's a tool. But we're going to develop an expense strategy for lowering our expenses as painlessly as we can. You want to develop an income strategy. Now, we'll be talking more about that as we go, but you want to figure out, how can I increase my income also? Because what's important, remember, is not the income or just the expenses. It's the spread. It's the combination of those. But ideally, you have to get a surplus identified. Somehow we have to be generating that 10% of your income that we talked about earlier. That is the key to making everything work. Everything. And then you've already probably accumulated some debt. We want to analyze the debt. We're going to make some decisions on is it good debt or bad debt. And then you ultimately want to develop a strategy to get rid of all the bad debt. So you're going to have a debt reduction strategy on a way to eliminate your current debt, because that debt will keep you from attaining your financial objectives.